In today's Farm Report, the U.S. Department of Agriculture recently released its 2015 Planting Intentions Survey results. Gary Crawford with the USDA has more.
Most of us are familiar with this game show.
It's time to play Family Feud,
where families answer questions trying to match what an audience survey said. Well, let's play the game a little differently, matching the forecast that Acting Agriculture Department Chief Economist Rob Johansson made in mid-February about how many acres farmers would plant this spring to corn and soybeans, matching those with a planting intentions survey of actual farmers made during the first 2 weeks of March. All right, first question, Rob Johansson, what was your February forecast of how many acres farmers would plant to corn this spring?
Corn area shows the largest single reduction in area, expected to fall 1.6 million acres in 2015-16 to 89 million acres.
Survey said
89.2 million acres. Not bad at all, Rob.
We did very well.
Yes, you did. Now, go to your forecast for soybean plantings in February. You said
Soybean area is expected to fall modestly from its record area in 2014 to 83.5 million acres.
survey said
farmers intend to increase soybean plantings to a record high 84.6 million acres, up 1% from last year. Of course, Rob says a lot has happened since mid-February. Soybean prices and demand have both been better than expected, so farmers at least a few weeks ago were indicating a slight shift away from corn and to soybeans. And overall, the survey shows U.S. farmers this season will likely plant 2 million fewer acres to the 21 so-called principal crops.
Price expectation is much lower than it has been over the last couple of years, and typically that would mean that farmers would plant less.
And we've already heard about corn acreage being down. Almost every Corn Belt state showing a decline in corn planting intentions. Meanwhile, wheat will lose about 1.4 million acres nationally. Cotton also by about that much. Most notable overall declines in general for principal crops, the Southwest, which is facing severe water constraints, and in California.
We've got the lowest principal crop planted acres in California since 1866.
And across the country, some shifting around of crops, more soybeans, and also Rob Johansson says
we are seeing for some of the minor feed grains an increase in acres, in particular barley and sorghum, and those prices have been very strong relative to corn. And so what we're seeing is producers are moving out of corn into sorghum and out of cotton into sorghum and barley as well.
Growers say they'll boost sorghum acres by 11%, barley by 10%. But again, a lot can happen between when the farmer survey was taken in early March and the time farmers actually start planting in earnest. In Washington, Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The next monthly World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates Report, which USDA analysts who work on it simply call it the WASDE, is due out this Thursday. These reports contain forecasts for U.S. ag product supplies, use, including exports, also prices, plus estimates for most of the world's major producing countries. Now, back on Tuesday the 31st, USDA released its report on farmers' planting intentions and also reports on grain stocks. Now, you might think that those planting intentions would be rolled into this new WASDE for a forecast of this upcoming season's production and so on, but
we won't publish numbers for the 15-16 crop year in this report.
Seth Meyer with the USDA's Outlook Board told us there's simply too much to do to get those forecasts ready.
We have to update an entire world balance, incorporate those prospective plantings, at the same time come up with area supply and demand for countries around the world. So the first time you see that is in May for the out year.
However, analysts will use the new grain stocks data to update this year's estimates. The new WASDE due out Thursday noon Eastern Time. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
The 2014 Farm Bill created new programs for producers and consolidated others, like the new ASEP program, which combined the conservation easement programs from various departments. Rod Bain with the U.S. Department of Agriculture has more.
Landowners, especially ag producers. Remember all those conservation easement programs USDA offered in the past? One for working lands, one for wetlands, one for grasslands. The 2014 Farm Bill combined these USDA conservation easement programs into one main entity.
We were pleased to announce the new Agricultural Conservation Easement Program last year. Since that announcement, we've seen 144,000 acres enrolled in a variety of conservation easements, 485 easements to be exact. These are easements that are protecting major environmental locations.
And Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack recently announced the fiscal year 2015 round of funding for ASEP.
The availability of $332 million in financial and technical assistance under the Agriculture Conservation Easement Program for 2015.
USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service oversees ASEP. And the chief of NRCS, Jason Weller, says this program is an important part of the overall conservation toolbox and complements other NRCS financial and technical programs.
What's great about these easements is that you can also have long-term and permanent protection of vulnerable habitats such as wetlands, whether you're in the Everglades, whether you're in Central Valley of California, whether you're in the Mississippi floodplain along the Mississippi River. But then also it's really critical that these are also working land conservation easements, that you can protect open space, you can protect the integrity of agricultural landscapes, prevent it from subdivision and development. You keep those working lands intact. But they're also then you can keep working grasslands intact as well. And the easements are a vital strategy across the U.S., but particularly in the West, where we're looking at critical species such as the sage grouse and other vulnerable species.
And Secretary Vilsack says ACEP also offers private landowners, tribal members, and eligible entities flexibility.
We have a variety of options under this program: permanent easements, 30-year easements, term easements, and 30-year contracts, all designed to provide protection and assistance to preserve precious land to ensure that it provides us the opportunity to continue to have the agriculture that we enjoy in this country.
While applications can be submitted to local NRC offices at any time, for the current funding round, fiscal year 2015, the deadline to submit your ACEP application is May 15th. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. Soils are nature's way of filtering out impurities in water, making it clean and safe to drink. And as Al Averill of USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service points out, soil also plays a key role in capturing water as well, whether as a source for an underground aquifer or above-ground reservoir, or as a method to absorb potential floodwaters.
Especially in this day and age where we're seeing much more extreme weather events. So it becomes even more and more crucial for us to take care of the soil and try to maintain it and keep it healthy.
So while practices such as limited or no tillage and sustaining plant life help build soil structure and improve soil's ability to filtrate and absorb water, Averill says when we do not take care of soils, impacts can range from increased erosion to lower water quality.
And also, if you don't have water infiltrating down through the soil, you decrease the contact time of the water in the soil, and that reduces the soil's ability to filter out contaminants.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Some winters can be brutal, especially to trees if the heavy snow bends them down. Gary Crawford with the U.S. Department of Agriculture shares some do's and don'ts for managing those trees.
Many areas of the country have had multiple ice storms this winter, snowstorms, high winds. We've been hearing a lot of reports like this.
This has been a tough situation here. We've got power lines down.
Many of those lines down, of course, because trees and tree limbs fell on them. It's been a tough winter for trees. So as we finally get into spring, what should we do about possible tree damage in our yards? One obvious thing.
First of all, we just need to stand back and look at the tree.
Without, seeming odd about that. That's the easy part, though. Dennis Patton is Kansas State University Extension horticulturist.
And what we're looking for initially would be what I would call hangers or broken branches that are just barely hanging on. A wind or something like that could easily knock those out of the tree and damage property or hurt you. So first of all, just assess the tree to make sure you don't have any of these potential falling branches.
Also, you may have already had limbs come down over the winter. We did at our house. Patton says you don't want to just leave those places, where the limbs snapped like they are. Those edges need to be recut, and if you don't do that,
rotten decay is going to get in there, and that rotten decay will follow down into that stem over time and just increase the decay. You also may get a lot of what we call sucker growth coming out of those areas too that are going to be very weak wooded. So in the next wind, next ice storm, those are going to be more likely to be damaged.
Some of this work, of course, you can do yourself if it's near the ground, but Patton says
if it involves you getting more than 1 or 2 steps off the ground on a ladder, you need to call a professional to do the job. There are always accidents every year where would-be do-gooders are trying to get up there and reach that broken limb, and they end up falling, getting hurt. Of course, you got power lines to deal with, all those type of things. So here again, if it's more than a couple steps off the ground, hire a professional.
Yeah, just keep in mind that insurance commercial, where the homeowner's up there with a chainsaw cutting that big limb and right on the car.
Hence the reason why it's always better to hire a professional.
Yes.
They assume some of the liability then if a dumb accident like that would happen.
Now, hopefully, the people you hire will know the basics of pruning these damaged limbs. For example,
Always go back to the next lower branch, crotch angle, fork in the tree, junction, whatever term you want to call it. And then we make our clean cut there.
why there?
That area there has the best ability in the tree to seal off, help heal that wound, and direct that growth to a positive location, energy in the tree itself.
Oh, and Dennis Patton says there's no need for paints, sealants, anything like that on those cuts. The tree knows what to do. And Patton says doing a good job on that damaged tree.
Probably is going to help set that tree up for a longer life.
And less damage in the future, too. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
If you produce honeybees, certain types of livestock, or farm-raised fish, and you experienced a disaster that caused losses to your crops, you may be receiving disaster assistance through a program offered by USDA's Farm Service Agency.
We're announcing that about 2,700 applicants will begin to receive disaster assistance under ELAP, which covers a year-long period from October of 13 to September of 2014.
FSA Administrator Val Docini says $20 million in funding for fiscal year 2014 will come from the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish program.
ELAP is a tool that is going to be made available in 44 states this year, so I think just about every corner of the country will receive some form of assistance under the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program.
And the administrator says most of this fiscal year's ELAP assistance has been received by beekeepers
who've suffered not only from some weather-related losses, but things like colony collapse disorder.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.